Alright, we're starting the stream. Let's see how it goes. Let's see what's up. And if this is playing, hopefully it is. Hopefully this is the mic that I'm talking in. Looks like it's going up, and I hope this is all good. How is everyone doing today? Hope everyone is doing alright. Okay, it looks like I'm up. I probably can stop singing, but I guess I keep singing. How is everyone? Hello, Seal. Hello, Just Carowin. Hello, Tom Moore. And Pedro and Stewart. And Ringworld and Gozer the Traveler. How is everybody doing today? You're welcome for all that, everybody. All right, how's everything? So it looks like we are live. Looks like everyone's here. Hello, hi Anime, Gavin, and the Linux. Hello, Miguel. How is everyone doing this evening? What is new? What is up? Hopefully everything looks good. I know the view. Oh wow, I look really pale today. I put on makeup because I thought I looked a little bit too red, but now I look like a ghost. Ooh, I look like I'm a crazy ghost. Sorry, I'm being overly judgmental of myself. Yeah, I look really pale in this video. Oh well. Alas. So, what is up, everybody? No, I didn't rearrange my room, so one of my friends is moving in the coming days and needed someone to come help. And so I am just staying with a friend for a few days. Don't worry, we're both, she's been socially distancing forever. I've been socially distancing for forever. So we've been trying to do it as safely as possible, like wearing masks, and I really don't really go and do anything other than hang out here and play board games. So we've just been hanging out, and I'm just came to stay with a friend and help a friend. I live in Los Angeles, and she's in Sacramento, so I'm just in Sacramento right now. So that's all of her stuff. Over here. The MVP and the dinosaur and that stuff. I'm not a most valuable player of anything, except for maybe like video games. Halo. Maybe I'm an MVP in Halo. That's about it. She actually got that for doing physical things. I did not. Yes. So yeah, the dinosaur is all hers as well. Well, thank you very much, Pedro, for saying I look amazing. I have this idea for a story about a farting Romulan and her Vulcan husband. I'm very curious to see how that episode will go. I'm interested in that. Will all episodes release at once? Burax is asking. You're talking about Lower Decks or Discovery. From what I can tell, both of them are doing weekly. So, I'm doing really well. Other than, like I said, I've been kind of up and down. Job stuff has been interesting. I had basically the job that I'm really interested in. Sounds like they actually talked to all my references, and my references gave good reviews to everything. So that's kind of the thing I'm in mind now. I got an email from them yesterday that sounds like basically what it sounds like is, from what I can glean from their sort of pseudo email that they have, basically they want to give me the job, but they're not entirely sure they can afford me at the moment because of the way America's going. So we'll sort of see how it works out, because it's a really cool looking job. I'm very excited about it. And like I said, from what I can glean, it sounds like I basically have it. It's just more, will they have a job available is more the question. Basically from what I can tell from the email. So fingers crossed, we'll see how things go. Knock on wood, I'm very excited about it. Haven't heard back from Polygon yet, which I also applied to, which is the other big job that I was hoping for. But on the bright side, I've been seeing on Twitter, just because I've obsessively looked on Twitter, a lot of people have gotten denial letters from Polygon, and I haven't heard anything. So I won't take that as a good sign, but I'll take the fact that I haven't heard anything and other people have gotten denials, that I'll take it as not a bad sign. That's basically how I'll take that. So it's not a bad sign, not a good sign, but not a bad one. So we'll fingers on that. So yeah, we'll see how everything shakes out in the end. But on the bright side, things look possible, which is good. So yeah, that's how I'm doing. Life is good. Hanging out with a friend, playing board games. We were playing Terraforming Mars last night. So yeah, that's how my things are going. And thank you, Stu. Thank you for doing positive Trek stuff. My YouTube feed has too many people calling for failure of Trekking. You love it. Well, thank you so much. I always try and be honest. Like, I won't lie. I'll probably always be positive. I mean, I'm generally just a positive person. I never hate anything. Like, even the worst movies that I really dislike, I hate Batman v Superman, and I still find it interesting and like to talk positively, or constructively, I guess is the better way to put it. I'll never be negative. I'll never be like, this thing sucks and needs to be destroyed. I'll be like, I didn't like that thing. Here's how you could have done it better, or here's some things that I think could have made it work. But I'm never going to hate on something. That's just not going to be my thing. It looks to me like I'm not frozen. I'm checking the stream over here. So, well, all right. So I want to engage more with the chat, everybody, and I want to talk with all of you who are in the chat right now. But technically today, since this is the last live stream of the month, that means my Patreons over on my Patreon page actually get first dibs on questions and topics. So I'm going to jump over to my Patreon page in just a second. I'm going to jump over to my Patreon in just a second, and then all the questions I'm going to be answering first on this live stream for about 30 minutes or so will be questions from my patrons, and then which some of you may be out there in the chat. So if I read your question, you want to correct something or engage with me on the question, feel free. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then once we finish out once I finish off the Patreon questions, like I said, which will take about half an hour, I will open it up for everyone in the chat, and we can sort of see what you guys all want to talk about. And I'm happy to rant about whatever you want to do for that. And actually, like Janice, I think you just hit a question about negative Star Trek outlets, which I'd love to talk about. But save it for everyone on the Patreon. So, yeah, if you want to get your question read first during the last live stream every month, you can be a Patreon. Otherwise, they get to get first dibs in the last live stream of the month. Can't speak. Okay. And yes, Pedro, I am playing Steve. I got kind of structured. I structured my Patreon kind of similar to a few different people. Steve was one person I based off of. Council of Geeks was another, and there was someone else whose Patreon that I kind of like stole ideas from in terms of levels and things. And I want to probably restructure my Patreon a little bit more. I want to try and keep giving more things to you, but also not like inundate myself from going crazy. Anyways, let's focus on what we need to be doing right now. So, just jumping over to here, make sure that went up correctly. So you're gonna see double here for a second. You're gonna see my face over on this side here. I just want to make sure. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Did go up. Cool. Okay. So, first question is from Matthew C. Weiss. Matthew, are you out there in the chat? If you are, give a holla. I'll keep an eye out for you as I answer this questions. Matthew asks, would you be interested in playing a character in an upcoming, apologies if I butcher this name. I mean no ill intent towards the language that it is, but apologies in advance if I screw up this word. But would you be interested in playing a character in upcoming Prankasha Productions Star Trek / the Orville fan video series? It's all green screen stuff, so you could probably shoot it from your studio unless you want to drive up to Linwood to use ours. Well, thank you so much for asking me to do that. Certainly, I would definitely be interested if you wanted to message me on Patreon. I can't guarantee anything yet because it really depends on level of involvement you need. I mean, I got a billion other things I'm doing in my life, but I've definitely been more than happy to be in other people's productions. I'm appearing in like a Trexpertise video later on. I've been in a couple of I've been in Council of Geeks stuff. So yeah, I'm more than, and I've done stuff with German Trekkie, who has his own like little fan film series. So I'm more than happy to be involved in any production, but it really kind of depends on the logistics of it and like how much you need from me versus how much time I have available, things like that, stuff like that. But yeah, reach out to me, and I'd certainly love to. At least hear the pitch and see if I'd like to be involved, because I like Star Trek, I like the Orville, and crossing them over sounds like a lot of fun. So yeah, let me know. So Christina Dalliance. So my apologies in advance for this question because I saw you post it, and I already know I'm not going to be able to answer it as well as I could because it's just been a while since I've had this, since I've seen the episode that you're talking about. But, it looks like a person commented on the post. So, Opus, if you are out there in the live stream, I think you just commented, so I'll make sure to refresh and find your comment once we're done on everyone else's. Christina Dalliance asks, thoughts on the arguments from DS9 being exaggerations, the augments from DS9 being exaggerations of the four temperaments, humors, choleric, sanguine, melancholic, and phlegmatic. Excuse me. So apologies in advance, Christina. This is one that, if you want to ask two questions next month, I'd be happy to answer that because I feel bad because number one, you're asking about an episode of DS9, which I believe you're asking about the DS9 episode where Dr. Bashir has those augments who have all kind of had issues stemming from the fact that they were augmented. So he comes and tries to see if he can fix them, and they're all friends with him and things like that. It's been a long time since I've seen that episode. I have not done a full DS9 rewatch in a while, and that's one that I've not done when I've done like individual episodes. So apologies right up front that I actually don't have the frame of reference to be able to talk about that in any specific detail. One of the interesting things that you sort of I also don't know much about the 4 temperaments, to be honest, either. So I'm just going to apologize right up front and say thank you for the question, and I'm sorry that I can't answer it with any sort of detailed thought because it's just sort of not inside my expertise. But either if you want to ask that question next month or ask 2 questions next month, I'd be happy to, or both of those, I'd be happy to try and do it again, because apologies if because I don't really know. But hopefully people in the chat found that interesting. It's a good question. It's actually a very thoughtful and deep question, and sadly I am it's too deep and too thoughtful for me to be able to answer at the moment. So Aaron J. Bullock asks, words. Hi, Jesse. This one is very personal, and I completely respect and apologize if it isn't something you feel like discussing, so here it goes. I've read this question beforehand. It's totally fine, but I appreciate you being aware and thoughtful of my feelings on my personal self. But I have read this question beforehand, so I know it's totally okay. I feel confident that I'm at least as progressive and open-minded as any middle-aged cis female mom from Montana, excuse me. Still, as such, sometimes I feel like I need more understanding, which is part of why I've been hooked on your channel since my first episode. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad I can be of any help or assistance in helping you learn and understand more. I've watched your clips about the differences between gender identity and sexuality. It wasn't something I was even aware was a thing until later in life, though in retrospect I've always wandered in the spectrum. So I'm curious as to your gender and sexual identities and how they have fluctuated or changed throughout your life, transition, and maturity. Did any specific experiences or influences make it easier or harder to understand? Did you feel like that aspect of yourself has changed? Again, I'm not trying to be intrusive. I'm trying to be a more cognizant human being and parent, and really sorry if it sounded rude. It was not. Totally okay. But I appreciate you coming at it with caution and understanding that it could be a rude question. For me, it's not. Other people have different lines, different limits. I'm a clown on YouTube who talks about her life a lot, so don't worry about it. Thank you so much for your time and all your work. You help us all be better folks. Well, thank you. Again, like I said, thank you so much for that question. So there's a lot in this question that I could literally rant, and I have basically, most of my videos are kind of answering this question in different facets in different ways. So, I just making sure the live stream's still going because I'm getting I got a weird notice on my thing. Still is. Okay. So anyways, there's a lot in that question. And I could literally go on for hours and hours about how my relationship to my gender identity and sexuality and gender and all of that has fluctuated throughout my life. And like I said, I've written numerous videos about little tiny details of it. But I think I'll try and answer the core of your question, like the sort of in sort of broad strokes. In that, throughout my life, my gender and sexual identity has been a ever-changing target, and something that has shifted for many reasons. And as I learn more about myself, it changes. As I've learned, as I've been able to express myself more, I've learned different things. So, for example, before I came out as trans, I always saw. I knew since I was a little kid that I felt trans, that I felt like I wasn't the gender that I was born, that I was. For me as a kid, I said I want to be a girl. That was the only thing I kind of had the tools to express. Like, I want to be a girl, I want to wear dresses, I want to be feminine, that sort of thing. And so when I came out as trans years later in college, I expressed femininity in kind of the most stereotypical terms that I knew. I wore dresses all the time, my makeup was super heavy all the time whenever I was out. I worried about whether I should quote unquote play video games, because video games aren't a girly thing. And that was when I first came out, because I'm like, well, my only touchstone for how to be a woman myself is the sort of stereotypes of that. And So I saw my gender as that way. But as I grew and learned more about myself, I learned that that's not how I wanted to express myself. And so I started to find my own gender identity that I was comfortable with, that was sort of in the middle. And I still identified as a woman, but as I've grown from there, I've started to learn more that I identify as a little bit more gender fluid. But that's not something, like, don't fully identify as a woman. I identify as a little bit like, I say demigirl, which is sort of like identifying mostly as a woman, but not fully and not always. And sometimes it shifts a little bit from time to time. But I could only have gotten to that point by going to the extreme first and saying, like, that's not for me. And also, I could have only gotten to that point if I hadn't gone through the transition journey of coming out as trans. So all these points on the spectrum are just dots along my journey. And I don't think at any point were they not valid representations of who I am, but they were just valid representations of who I was at that time, and now they are different. It's a video that I'm going to be doing a video on this kind of concept later on, where it's like questioning, like, am I trans anymore? Because trans is about being transitionary, but I don't see myself as really transitioning anymore. So yes, I am trans in sort of the political sense, is like the trans people are a political group, political entity, a group of people that are, oppressed by certain groups and have solidarity with each other. But I don't necessarily know on a sort of philosophical gender level, am I trans anymore? But again, that's sort of how that shifted through my years. Same thing with sexuality. Sexuality is even harder because I kind of knew that I liked guys when I was a kid, and I thought of myself as a guy at the time, or at least kind of present to the world that I was a guy. But I didn't necessarily say I was bisexual, but I still like girls. But it was just something like, I can't really quantify my sexuality without first quantifying my gender. So it was just something that was very confusing. It's a really hard answer to sort of encapsulate my entire life, because like this question you're asking is basically the journey of life. We all shift. I mean, I would even say to probably many of you listening out there in the chat, I would even argue, like, how you expressed your gender when you were, 10 years ago versus how you express your gender today, that's different. Maybe you'd say your gender hasn't changed, but it's changed. And it's just life and how it shifts. And that happens even for cis people who don't identify as trans at all or ever identified as trans. So it's all a shifting target. And trans people just tend to go to more extremes. So there we go. Yeah. I'll sort of wrap it out there because, again, I could go on for hours about that question. It's a very, very good question. And I hope that my videos are all about, or at least the ones that deal with my personal life, at least, not Star Trek or any other thing, are answering those questions. So, sorry, chat. I know we're on like two different wavelengths. I'm answering trans questions and just talk about Q and Burnham's hair going on in the chat. So, sorry, we're on a couple different wavelengths. But like I said, want to get to these questions first. So, hopefully, it's interesting to all of you out there in the chat as well. And I hope I'm not just having too many weird diatribes here. And if you guys have anything that you want to ask off of the questions, please let me know. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat while also answering these questions. So if there's a question based off of what I'm asking or been asked, please feel free to sort of jump off of it. Okay. Hannah F. asks, a lot of activism is born out of pain and necessity. Thus, activists are almost by definition not neutral, nor should they have to be. But if one is hurting, it can be difficult to differentiate. I don't call myself an activist, but I too have literally screamed at people in frustration for insisting, e.g. on existential views and turfy, for those of you who don't know, trans-exclusionary radical feminist, biology talking points, including my own brother, who to this day thinks he always just knows when a person is trans because it always shows. Oh, I'm sorry you have to deal with that, Hannah F., because clearly not the case, but we'll get into your question. IOW, I get frustration, I get anger, I get pain, but I know my anger has also burnt bridges in my life, some of which could not be rebuilt, and I have seen vulnerable people shouted off Twitter for trying to build bridges instead of burning them. I have left Twitter myself because of constant anger and pain. Again, totally understand that on many levels. When Buck Angel insists, for many of you who don't know, Buck Angel was, and I guess still is, a prominent trans man who has appeared in a lot of porn He became famous for being like sort of the basically a trans man in porn, and has very biological based trans views. Like, you can't be trans unless you want to transition in some way, which is an incorrect viewpoint, but it's also a whole thing to break down. Then he is repeating a turf talking point. Yet he'll be the first to agree trans men should be in general be treated as men by society, i.e. he seems to purposely misunderstand the statement trans men are men. He's arguing in bad faith. So I guess my question would be, how does one find the balance? Can it even be done? Criticize people for shitty use, yet not close the door on them completely, even if they're friends and family? How does one keep from starting to just assume bad faith all around, considering how much bad faith is actually out there? I don't engage with people anymore, especially not online. I don't have the spoons. But the truth is, I don't know anymore how. This is a great question. Another one that it will take a long time to break down, and I try to break it down too. And I talked a little bit about this when it comes to J.K. Rowling. In I think the latest video I did on her like a week or two ago. And for this question, it's a difficult one to answer because there is no one answer. There is only the answers for you, and I agree, Gozer. Buck Angel is an abuser, a scammer, and a bigot. I 100% agree. But to answer this question specifically, there is no right answer, and there's only the right answer for you in the context that you're in. When it comes to someone like, I'll just use J.K. Rowling because she's sort of an easy one that we all kind of know and can kind of recognize and understand. I spoke about this in my video, like I said. I don't think she intends to mean well. She wants to do well for trans people. I don't think she actively is out there, like, screw trans people. But her views are expressly harmful towards trans people. Whether she intends that to be the case, her views are very hurtful and harmful and are manipulative in how she frames them. Again, whether that is her intent or not, that's what they are. Hands down, no question, bar none. And so it's hard to choose. How do you engage with that? What's the right path? I mean, for me, I don't think there's anything I could ever... J.K. Rowling's never going to talk to me. She's probably never going to come across some of my videos. I mean, there's the wild chance she may one day, but I doubt it. So for me, it's kind of like the way I want to address it is like, I want to, try to talk to the people that I can. And talking to the people I can sometimes means trying to try and be like, look, I understand this is hard and difficult to understand, but let's try and have a conversation, and making mistakes is okay here. That's how I try to generally go about things. Be like, if you don't get all the stuff about trans people, that's okay. I totally understand. Let's make mistakes together. But there are people who, that having that conversation is a lot more labor than they have energy for. Even for me, that to create that space where we can like have conversations and talk, it's a lot of work. It's why I do YouTube so much, because it's like I have to put a lot of work into these videos. It takes a lot of time to respond to you, to talk to you, to make the videos, to have these discussions, to have discussions with people who are maybe even more bad faith than I assume. And so that's a lot of work on myself, and not every trans person should have to do that work. And you have to know what is healthy for you and what's not healthy for you. I mean, it's a hard answer, because I remember when I started YouTube about like a year or two ago, about 2 years ago, I would try to respond to every single comment and try and convince every single person, be like, engage with every single person. I just don't have the time and energy for that anymore. Even then, when I was a much smaller YouTuber, that just tired me, and I don't always have the energy for that. It just takes a lot of work and energy. And so it really comes down to how much energy you have and how much the person means to you versus how much they're hurting you. If a family member is someone you really care about and you want to try and engage with them and try to make them understand, go for it. But you also have to take into account how much they're hurting you. If it's like a abusive parent, for example, who just does not understand you and will never understand you and actively hurts you when you try to engage them in good faith, then you just have to know when the point is like, I got to step away from my own health and cut it off. And that's hard. It's a very, very hard thing to do, and very, very hard thing to to have to do, and it takes a lot of self-awareness and constantly checking in with yourself. You have to constantly stop and be like, all right, where am I at? Is this still healthy for me to engage with this? Am I doing anything? I don't know. I can't answer that for you. It's all on an individual basis. And so I think those are the three factors that I would keep in mind. What I said earlier, I think the three factors of like how much energy you have, I guess four factors, I should say. How much energy you have, how much you can actually affect this person, whether it's like you're just screaming at a wall or you can actually affect them, how much you care to affect this person, and how much they're harming you. So I think those are probably the four factors to keep in mind. And I know that that's sort of a long, rambly answer. I don't really necessarily have... I probably could have more concise viewpoints if I sat and thought about it for a while. But that's sort of my general, random, willy-nilly live stream thoughts on it. And hey, Council of Geeks, it's good to see you. Those willing to have those talks should be respected because it is not the responsibility of the member of the minority to explain their lives. Agreed, yeah. And I think I tried to touch on that, but very, very much agree, Council. Good to see you too, by the way. Yes. Like, for me, I am someone who I love explaining things. My parents were teachers. I grew up with teachers. My mom's a teacher. My grandmother's a teacher. My grandfather's a teacher. I like teaching. If I hadn't gone into video, I would have been a teacher. I almost considered being an English teacher. That's what I like to do. I like teaching. It's fun. And so when I sort of learned a lot more about the trans community and queer community, that's when I was like, I like to do that. And I'll teach you all day. But not every trans person, not every minority group, any minority group should have to do that work. Often many minority groups are placed in that situation where they have to be the ones explaining. I mean, we saw it a few weeks ago where, I was listening to podcasts talking about this and listening to people talking about this, but like when all the protests for Black Lives Matter happened a few weeks ago, there was a huge influx of people of color, black people, getting messages from their white friends saying, hey, what do I do? What am I supposed to be doing? Can you teach me? Can you help me understand? And so a lot of like white people put the burden on their black friends to explain to them what was going on and what was so important. It's like, no, you should not be putting that burden on the people of color, of your black friends. You need to go out and do the work yourself. Read the books, find the videos. They are already all out there. This information is not new. It exists in the world. So don't put the burden on people. If you want to learn, do not put the burden on a minority member. You need to do the work yourself. And there are people of the minority communities, like myself for trans people, other people for people of color, things like that, who have already done the work and have been like, hey, I like writing about this. Here's some information for you. And those things exist. So anyways, spent a lot of time talking about this. Thank you so much, Hannah. That was another excellent question. I really appreciate it. Sorry to like, this is probably self-aggrandizing, but dang, patrons, you are all really smart people. So patrons, if you're out there, you are really, really smart people, and I'm very lucky to have such like thoughtful people in my Patreons. So yeah, thank you so much for those good questions. Okay, and again, sorry people in the chat. Nearing the end here, so apologies if I missed a few interesting comments here and there. So like I said, I'll be hanging around for it once these questions are done. So if there's anything that I missed that you wanted me to see, please feel free to save it, and I'll try and get to it later. All right, Joe McClory asks, do you have any guilty pleasure shows or movies that you keep going back to, or any show or movie you loved as a kid and are afraid to go back to because you worry seeing it with a more critical eye will make the memories of it less good? Whew, that is a really difficult one. I could probably think of a ton. Honestly, a ton. I mean, Harry Potter kind of fits that bill quite nicely for even reasons beyond J.K. Rowling. It's a problematic series if you really, really look into it, but there's an element of me that still kind of likes it, weirdly enough. I would even say like things like comedies are generally the ones that don't always hold up too well in my mind. What was I watching? Oh, I was even watching like Doctor Who last night with my friend. We were watching Doctor Who, and we were watching the Shakespeare Code episode where he, David Tennant runs into William Shakespeare, and they have like references to Harry Potter in it. And at one point in the episode, he goes like, "Good old J.K." when it was like they make a Harry Potter joke. I'm like, that didn't age well. I mean, it's nothing against the people who wrote Doctor Who, I'm sure didn't intend anything awful by it because at that time they didn't know. But it's just like, oh yeah, that kind of ruins that. Not that the Shakespeare Code was a great episode, mind you, but there's always elements of that in things. In terms of guilty pleasure, so yeah, I would just say comedies, like some older Red Dwarf stuff probably didn't age all that well. Usually anything that had like vague trans humor in it. Like I loved Venture Brothers, or I watched Venture Brothers 2 or 3 years ago, also with my friend who I'm staying with. And that show, like the early seasons of that show, had a lot of transphobic stuff that did not age super well. But then they like made it work later seasons. So comedies, guilty pleasure stuff. I'm trying to think of like what would be like a guilty pleasure thing that I go back to all the time. I think it's not really a show, but the guilty pleasure thing that I go back to really, really often is oh, didn't know that. Thank you, Council. Shakespeare Code is written by Gareth Roberts, who was a vocal transphobe. So I guess screw that episode. Shakespeare Code can go down the tube in my mind for numerous reasons. I guess he was projecting into the future. Look at him. What was I saying? Guilty pleasure stuff. So weirdly, like audio dramas are like weirdly my guilty pleasure things, and I'm like, these are bad, but I really enjoy them. Like there's a Lord of the Rings NPR audio drama that I listen to like go to sleep a lot, and it's awful. Like, okay, there's some good quality to it, but it's got like a lot of reused effects. The voice acting is not great, but I get a lot of comfort out of it. So, so I'll say like, I think like weirdly audio dramas, like I have a bunch of them here. Like I have to look through I have a bunch like saved on my phone. The Aragon books, I listen to those books on tape quite a bit. I'm actually listening to the Del Toro series. They're like Del Toro fantasy novels, like kids novels. They're great to fall asleep to. They're like a good guilty pleasure. But I listen to them like, oh man, these are, I don't want to say bad, but very, very childish in their writing. But they're just good to like, is like comfort food. And then the other thing that I've been kind of like comfort fooding recently and like guilty pleasuring, and I guess it's not really a guilty pleasure, it's just a pleasure, is Stargate. I've been rewatching Stargate quite a bit lately and just like, oh, gosh, I want Stargate back. I loved that show so much. One of my personal favorites of all time. So, all right. I think there's this question. I think 2 people asked questions while I'm going to quick refresh this page. Because I think 2 people asked questions while we were talking. So I'll quick do that. Okay, yeah. So 2 people. So I want to, and there's one more above it. Dealing with slow internet is fun. All right, so 3 more questions real quick. There's another Patreon Q&A I have at the same time. Why? I'm sorry. Do you have a P.O. box? Your hair is wonderful. Do you wear it up? Do you go to convention? You're asking a lot of questions, Al, which is totally okay. They're all quick ones. Do you have a P.O. box? No, I do not have a P.O. box. I should set one up because you're not the first person to ask me that. Maybe I'll set one up. Tell me, should I set up let me know in the chat. Should I set up a P.O. box? I probably should at this point. Your hair is wonderful. Do you ever wear it up? No, not really. To be honest with you, thank you so much for commenting on my hair. I wish I knew how to do hair stuff more. I am terrible with hair. Like, absolutely terrible. I've been told my hair is good, but I don't know what to do with it. I'm awful with it. So if anyone has good pointers on what to do with hair or good, like, YouTube tutorials, I will take them in a heartbeat. Good to see you, Council. Sorry I couldn't talk to you more. We'll be talking to you tomorrow. But it's good to see you, Council. Hair. Don't know what to do. If anyone has any good recommendations, please let me know. I could definitely use the recommendations. Do you go to conventions a lot? Or I did, I guess. I'm very tired. I hope you're doing well. Your Patreon is picking up so you don't need to find a stinky job. Hopefully. I'm not at a point where I can go full-time yet, but it's getting there. If I projected out, we'll see how things grow, but potentially if things grow apace, theoretically I could do this full-time within 2 years. We'll see if that actually happens. I'm not going to jinx it, but theoretically, if things continue growing apace and I keep able to do this 2 years, I might be able to do this full-time. And things may go faster or slower, but sometime within the next 2 years, quite possibly. Conventions, I do try to go to conventions a lot. I was actually hoping to go to Star Trek Las Vegas this year. I know it's technically still supposed to take place this December. I don't know if that's going to be possible. If it does still happen and it is safe, I will go. And I like going to conventions. I try to go to conventions. But given the state of the United States right now, I would be surprised if the United States, if we're at a place where I can go to a convention like that in December, which sucks. But eventually, once things do start picking up, and once things start to being safe again, hopefully within the next year, we'll see, but hopefully within the next year, I do plan on going to a bunch of conventions. I do plan to keep coming to conventions and having fun. So in the near future, no. Once things open up again, 100%, I plan on going to a bunch of conventions. Definitely in the places where I live. So if I'm still in Los Angeles when conventions start up again, I'll definitely be going to LA conventions. If I'm living somewhere else, I'll go to those, but we'll sort of see. So, Opus asks, "Hi Jesse, I love your vids. What's your view on serialization of modern Trek? I prefer it lends more to a narrative structure and makes me eager to see the next episode. If a future Trek series or season of Picard Disco had a trans character, how would it sit with you? How would it be done? Can I ask what your accent is? Is it from the southern U.S.? Thanks." So there's a few questions you're asking in there, but I'll try and answer them briefly. So the modern view of serialization of modern Trek I've talked about in previous videos. I think the one where I talked about was I think it was called the Modern Star Trek is Great, actually. So if you want my more detailed thoughts, go watch that video, because I did talk about that there. But basically my thought on this is I like how modern Trek kind of does it. It's kind of my ideal serialization method, where it is serialized, but serialized by season. So each season sort of tells its own self-contained story. That way I get like a long arc of a story that completes by the end of the season. So I'm not sort of like left like waiting 2 or 3 seasons to like see how a storyline resolves. I kind of get a complete idea of the story by the end of the season. And it also means if the story ends up being something I don't like, I only have to live with it for a season. So I kind of like that method of serialization if you're going to do it, because when you get something like the Game of Thrones level of serialization, which can work if you plan it really well, but as we saw with Game of Thrones, if the ending is bad, it kind of retroactively makes the whole thing worse, even if you loved it. Like, I love Game of Thrones, but going back through that series, kind of knowing where it's going, kind of makes it a little bit, like, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But if you go through serialized season by season, you don't really have that problem. You're like, I didn't like season 2, but season 3 was great. So, if a future Trek series or season of Picard, Disco has a trans character, how would it be done? From what I hear, there's supposed to be a trans character in Discovery season 3. So I will probably save my thoughts for that trans character once I see them, but I am very excited. And there are numerous ways to do a trans character. I think the answer to your question is there's no one way to do a trans character, because trans characters are just as diverse as any other characters. So there is no way to do a trans character. The only thing I would just say is don't focus on them being trans. Don't be like, hey, look, it's the trans character. Look, they're trans stuff. They're going to talk about trans stuff all the time. But also don't have the transness be incidental. Don't have it be like, oh, yeah, they're trans and we're never going to talk about it. Like, have them being trans be brought up or be relevant when it's relevant, and when it's not relevant, then it doesn't matter. Kind of like they did with Stamets and Culber. Like, them being in love as gay men mattered at certain points, and at certain points it didn't. Like, does Stamets being gay mean that he's, it affects how he does science stuff? No, not really. But every once in a while it may, when it, like, conflicts with how he's treating himself because he has a boyfriend or a husband who loves him. And that's going to be something that comes up. But it's not something that's always relevant. So that's kind of like what I'll say. Like, make trans part of their character, but don't make trans their entire character. So that's probably the best way to put it. Oh, and my accent, I am from the Buffalo, New York area, so I guess my accent would be Buffalonian, if that's a thing. So yeah, so kind of like upstate western upstate New York sort of feel to my accent. There's a couple things that it's given me, like I say documentary instead of elementary. I say documentary and elementary. I know that's part of my accent. And I also cut the G's off of ing words. That's not just a upstate New York thing, but I know that cutting, like running instead of running. I think those are the only ones that I immediately remember about my accent. But yeah, I say documentary and elementary, not elementary and documentary. That's just weird part of my accent. Okay, last question from Eli, who I did see out in the chat a little bit ago. And this is the last question. I'll start engaging with the chat a little bit more. Hi, Jesse. During the period where Star Trek was much less present around the early 2000s, were there other shows or media you went to that felt like they filled the same niche as Trek? Yes, and I actually brought it up earlier. I think that probably the three biggest ones for me were, and I'll sort of go in descending order. Battlestar Galactica was sort of like the big, like, oh my gosh, this is my must-watch sci-fi show. Oh my gosh, I need to see every single episode of it every single week. So that was like my number one, like, this is my must-watch, 100% need to watch sci-fi show. My second one was Doctor Who, which I'm kind of sad Council isn't here anymore, but Doctor Who was sort of the second one. That was sort of like my weekly, like, this is my fun, engaging, I just sort of like want to have some whimsical time, characters that I get to know, characters that I invest in, sort of franchise that I can sort of delve into and like learn this huge long history and lore of sort of show. But I think the best show equivalent to like where that sort of like fit into my life in sort of the same place that Star Trek did was Stargate, actually. Stargate was 100% that show that was like, when Star Trek went away, Stargate sort of clicked into place. It was that show that like had a lot of like weird, quirky sci-fi concepts, but also very hard science fiction, had a bunch of like quirky characters, had spin-offs so you could kind of see how things interconnected. Like I loved, to be honest, Stargate Atlantis is my favorite of the Stargate shows, not SG-1. And I even like Universe, like a crazy person that I am. I like Universe. Don't love it, but I think Universe got solid towards the end. I even like Stargate Infinity, which I'm betting a lot of you don't even know what Stargate Infinity is. But it's fantastic because it's weird as hell. It's the animated show that they did for Stargate. It was weird and strange, but I loved it. It was wonderful. So yeah, in fact, I've been like lately the past few like weeks or months, basically ever since quarantine started, I've been really hankering for Stargate. I've been like watching it, like, you know. My typical like MO is on Friday nights. I try not to drink too much throughout the week because I don't want to get into that mode of like just drinking too much. But on Fridays, I'll usually get really drunk. I'll like have like 2 or 3 beers and watch some fun stuff, watch a movie with a friend or something like that. And generally, almost every Friday night, when drunk Jesse's like, I just want to watch something fun. What do I want to watch? Drunk Jesse apparently loves the crap out of Stargate. So, I just missed that sort of like Indiana Jones-esque feel. It was like hard sci-fi meets like Indiana Jones. And this is something that I've just been so frustrated with lately is like there's so few movies that really ever got to the heights of Indiana Jones. Stargate was one of them. Tomb Raider is kind of like Indiana Jones light. They're not great. Same thing with National Treasure. And there's a few other movies here and there that sort of pop up. But Stargate the show, SG-1 and Atlantis just really captured this sort of like adventure feel of Indiana Jones, of like fairly competent people, but not always as competent as they probably should be in crazy weird sci-fi situations, over the top situations that they have to like find their way out of. Like that was just so great. And I honestly, I would kill. I mean, I prefer a continuation, but even I would even settle for like an SG-1 reboot at this point. But I would honestly kill for a Stargate show. Like, we're living in Star Trek. Really, everything's getting rebooted and remade, and we're living in the Star Trek Renaissance right now. And I'm kind of frustrated we're not getting any Stargate. I mean, the last Stargate thing we got was Stargate Origins, which I don't hate. I know some people did not love it, but I don't hate it. I think for what it was, which was a low-budget web series, it was pretty solid for the fact that it had almost no budget and was trying to do an origin story. I think it was fine for what it was. I just think people's expectations got blown out of the water for it because they were just like, it's Stargate, we're going to get Stargate again. And when they got Origins, which was like this small thing, people just wanted more than what that was able to give. And also, I'll plug some other stuff. I actually did an interview with the director of the Stargate Origins web show way early back on my channel. Like, go back like 2 or 3 years and you'll probably find my interview with her. And she's great. I've actually been to her apartment for Halloween one year, and she's absolutely a wonderful human being. So Stargate Origins gets much more derided than it should have been. But anyways, I want a reboot of Stargate or a remake of Stargate or something Stargate. Just give me more Stargate. That's all I want. That's really all I want. All right, so that is it for all of my Patreon questions, which means, finally, I get to focus on all of you in the chat right now. So I know people have been sort of talking about Stargate, but I'm going to sort of keep my eye on it. What do all of you want to talk about? Let me know. I'll stick around for another, I tried to do this for an hour, so I'll talk for about another 15 minutes or so. So yeah, let me know what you all want to talk about in the chat, and if I missed anything that you thought I should have seen earlier in the chat, please feel free to repost it. I'm happy to go back. So yeah, I would love to hear what all of you want to talk about. Pedro asks, if you had to recommend Star Trek to someone who knows nothing about it, what specific episode of all series would you say is a good way in for both entertainment and moral values? Good question. So, starting places for Star Trek. That's a really good question. I mean, the original series, with the original series, honestly, just not season 3. Don't start at season 3. But other than that, I would say you can start anywhere for Star Trek, the original series. Next Generation, I would say you probably just want to start around like season 3 somewhere. Like maybe watch the Encounter at Farpoint so you get Q. But then after that, pretty much you can skip 90% of seasons 1 and 2. Maybe catch like Measure of a Man, or something like that, or any of like the big standout episodes of season 1 and 2, which there aren't many. But then just start like season 3 and go from there. And then season 3 forward is pretty good too. You can kind of mix and match anywhere in season 3. The only through lines you really need to pay attention to are obviously you need to do Best of Both Worlds. Deep Space Nine's a little bit harder. I would say, honestly, to watch Deep Space Nine, you at least need to give them a little bit of taste of Next Generation so they at least have some semblance of the world. So if you want to start Deep Space Nine, which is my favorite, you start right at season 1 of Deep Space Nine, maybe skip a few episodes of season 1, but overall just go right through Deep Space Nine, but give them a little bit of background in Next Gen. Voyager, same thing. You can pretty much start anywhere in Voyager, and I think you'll be about fine. Voyager's stays pretty consistent throughout its whole run. I think it gets better towards the end. But generally, I think Voyager kind of stays at a consistent level, even in Season 1, Season 2. Enterprise, I just start towards the end of Season 3. And then Discovery and Picard Discovery, I think is actually a halfway decent place to jump on, honestly. If someone's like, I don't like old stuff, I just want to watch new stuff, Discovery's fairly solid. Let's see. Did you like Babylon 5, Marco asked? I love Babylon 5. In fact, my hope would be Council's not here anymore, so we can talk about him behind his back. I do a podcast with Council of Geeks where we're doing a Farscape rewatch. And so I'm hoping once we finish Farscape, which will probably take about a year or two, but my hope will actually be to get him to watch Babylon 5. We'll see if we'll probably argue over what show to watch next, or if we'll even have time to continue the podcast or whatever. But my hope would be to do a rewatch of Babylon 5 once we finish Farscape. So we'll sort of see how that goes. Because I don't think Council has watched Babylon 5 at all either. So that's sort of fun. I would like to see a Sacred Treks episode for Drumhead. I will get there eventually. I've been kind of going through the original series in order, but I feel like once I hit the end of the original series of season 1 of the original series, I might jump around to a different season of a show. So we'll sort of see where I jump around. But I am planning on trying to do Sacred Treks for... I doubt I'll be able to... I'd probably have to do it for the rest of my life to get to every episode at the pace that I'm going. But I do plan on trying to hit some of the bigger ones at some point. Someone asked about politics. Do you care about politics? If so, would Biden beat Trump? 100% care about politics. If you haven't watched some of my videos, there are some very political videos, and I have some videos where I want to try and get a little bit more political. I've just been tired lately. The quarantine just has me kind of low energy in the past few weeks. So once I start having more energy to start doing political stuff, I actually do aim on doing it. In terms of Biden beating Trump, let's hope. Biggest thing is everyone has to vote. Go out and vote. I'm not going to say force you to vote for Biden, but don't throw away your vote. Vote for Biden if you're against Trump. And I would hope, if you're on this channel, you know why Trump's a shithead. Not even going to be whatever. I will talk. My dad's a conservative. I will talk conservatives. I don't agree with you. I will talk to even Republicans, though I think your party's insane at the moment. But if you like Trump and you still agree with Trump, I don't even understand how you could be on that point. Yeah, vote for Biden. That's all I'll say. I also understand why certain people have reservations for Biden to abstain from voting. I understand, but otherwise, please vote for Biden and not anyone else. And I'll leave it there because let's have a about politics. I do want to talk about a lot. And yeah, that's sort of my simple thoughts on a very, very overly complex situation. But yeah, there we go. Let's see. Have you checked out the Delta Flyer podcast with Garrett and Robert? No, but I heard it's a lot of fun. I do want to get into it. Right now I am doing a rewatch of Deep Space Nine, and so I'm like listening to rewatches of those episodes. But yeah. And I agree, Gozer. I will. Oh my gosh, I will do anything to vote for AOC in 2024 or whenever AOC will. I'm 100% certain, unless something terrible happens, AOC will eventually run for president, and she has 100% already got my vote. That's I 100% agree. There, Gozer. Jordan Joan, what did you think of Vagrant Queen? If you have seen it, yes, I have. I actually did. If you go back about a year ago on my channel, I actually did an interview with Maggie Visaggio. I hope I'm saying her name right. I did an interview with her back at the Seattle Comic Con, where I actually interviewed her about her comic book Vagrant Queen. This was before they even announced that the show was coming out. But she asked me, "Would you interview me about Vagrant Queen?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And so I didn't know that she was sort of doing that in preparation for announcing the show. Kind of building up hype. I was used like a puppet. But yeah, Vagrant Queen is a show. It's basically like the way they describe it is Star Wars meets the Coen brothers, which is a decent way to describe it. I would even say it's kind of like Farscapey. Or not Fars. Yeah, kind of Farscapey in a lot of ways. Kind of a modern take on Farscape. And it's written by, or at least was created by, it was a comic book by a trans woman, Magdalene is her name. And so I really loved the comic. I liked the show. It didn't blow me away, but I loved its style and presentation. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm very sad that it got canceled after one season, which kind of saddened me. It saddened me that it was canceled after one season, not just because I thought it was a good show, but also because like we really need to support shows by trans creators that aren't just about trans people. Like we do get shows like Pose and things like that, and I love Pose. But Pose is a show very much about the queer community and the queer experience and the positive and negatives of that. And that's important, and I really think it's a great show. But we also need shows like Vagrant Queen, where it's just like crazy, fun, science fiction, weird stuff from queer creators. And I'm kind of sad that the show didn't get a chance to shine more, because it was definitely, especially towards the end, was getting very, very good and definitely had a strong voice to it right off the bat. That I'm kind of sad that it's that it didn't get more of a chance to live and breathe and find its own voice even more so. So yeah, I would say if you haven't watched Vagrant Queen, I'd still say at very least read the comic book graphic novel. But the show is also very, very worth your time too. Even though it only lasted a season. I think it was a good one. Let's see. Did you get a chance to watch any of the virtual Comic-Con panels with Star Trek actors? I did. I thought it was good. I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't really anything surprising in there. But, one of the things I love about this any Star Trek era, you kind of get this. But especially with today's era of Star Trek, the actors just have such good rapport. They all seem to have such fun together. They all seem to, like, really enjoy each other. And I just like that. Like, I just like... We are spoiled for just good actors, regardless of what you think behind, of the quality of Discovery or Picard or whatever, Lower Decks. The actors themselves on the show are just truly wonderful and amazing people. I had the chance. I've talked and worked with Mary Chieffo, as you've seen with my /fiction video. So I know her and have talked to her. I've met Sonequa Martin Green briefly, and a few other people. And every time I meet them, they're just kind, wonderful, caring people. And so anytime I get to see them just interacting with each other, it's just wonderful. Also seeing Marina Sirtis rag on Patrick Stewart made my life. But other than that, in terms of the actual content of the panels, I thought it was okay, fine. I was hoping for some crazy announcements. I'm honestly shocked that they didn't announce the Discovery air date during the Comic-Con panel. That they waited 2 or 3 extra days to to do that, I was like very sad, honestly. I was like, why didn't you just announce it during the panel? But whatever. What are you gonna do? So I see people complimenting my slash fiction video. Thank you so much. That was one that I was like really proud of. In terms of how long it took me to make that, if you're asking about that, oh boy, it probably took me about 2 months. I mean, I was researching it. I did the research on it for about a month. It took me about like 3 or 4 days to write the bulk of it, with some editing time as I was just going through the whole editing time, and then to shoot it took relatively. I mean, my parts of it took like a day to shoot. Mary and Jessica Lynn Verity's part took like an afternoon to shoot their part, which was a lot of fun to do. It was so much fun. I have a lot of outtakes from that. It was a ton of fun to shoot that with Mary and Jessica. Great time. And then to edit it took about a month and a half. I wasn't working on it solo. I also had my other videos I was working on, so it wasn't just like one straight through month and a half work on it, but it was on and off about a month and a half to get it all done. So that's the long and short of it. Let's see. Have you played Wellington asks, and by the way, hi Wellington. Have you played Become Human? Detroit Become Human. I'm hooked. It's got me hooked. I never played third-person games. Yes, I actually really liked Detroit Become Human. I thought it was a very, very solid game. I always liked that company's games, though I know there's some problems with that company. Heavy Rain, which was one of their first sort of big splash games, is still one of my favorite games of all time. I loved Heavy Rain. It was one of the first video games that's like, oh, this can be more than what we think of it as. This can do more things. It can surprise me in more ways. So I loved Heavy Rain. Detroit Become Human, I thought was more of that. I really liked Detroit Become Human. I thought there were some problems with it in a few ways, mostly because it was talking about marginalized groups and tried in a couple ways and a couple different times to evoke the experience of African Americans and Black people in America, and not always with full deftness. I mean, the company's a French company, so it's like a bunch of French guys doing their best to understand the experience of Black men in America, and they didn't get it wrong. I definitely don't think they got it wrong, but it was a little less nuanced than it could have been. But I do think that it was overall a very, very good game. And there are some very salient moments in that game. Like, I think there's a scene where you're playing in that game. Not just to I won't spoil how it goes. I mean, the game changes based on how you play it, so it's hard to spoil where things go for you. But there's one scene that I thought was incredibly tense, where you're one of the droids with a young girl trying to cross the border into Canada. One of the most tense sequences. And I thought, from my own perspective, having never experienced something like that, so again, my opinion is probably not the best one to go on here, but from my experience, from what I learned about it, I think Detroit Become Human I thought that scene in Detroit Become Human, the border crossing, was a very, very good scene and a good understanding of it. So I think that was it was a good game. I enjoyed it. I think it got a lot more criticism than it should have for just the gameplay of it, and not enough criticism for it sort of not as deep as it could have been. Look at how groups are marginalized. But generally, overall, a good game. So that's my thought on that game. People are talking about Warehouse 13. That's a show that I missed. That was one of those, Warehouse 13 was one of those shows that, was starting as I was sort of, losing interest in the Sci-Fi Channel. So I kind of lost interest in Warehouse 13. I kind of lost interest in Sci-Fi Channel, and so I never really picked up Warehouse 13, because Warehouse 13 sort of started when, Doctor Who left Sci-Fi Channel, Stargate, both Stargate shows had ended, Battlestar Galactica had ended, so unfortunately, Warehouse 13 kind of got lost in the shuffle there, unfortunately. And Kevin Scott 76, hi, first time live on your chat. I'm usually on with Egotastic Fun Time or Space Command. Well, thank you for joining. I'm glad to see you're here. Yeah, Egotastic Fun Times. I don't know Space Command, but Egotastic Fun Time, while I certainly don't agree with his takes on Star Trek in terms of, like, he doesn't like the modern era of Star Trek as much. I think he seems like a good guy. Definitely not, one of the more problematic channels. He's just someone who I disagree with, and that's cool. That's fun. So I'm glad to have you here, and welcome. Yeah. So... And I'll go for about another 2 or 3 more minutes. If anyone has any other last-minute questions. You have any opinions on Dark Matter, 12 Monkeys, The Expanse, or Killjoys? Dark Matter and Killjoys I have not seen. 12 Monkeys, both the show and the movie, I think is really, really great. I have not finished 12 Monkeys, but I saw like the first season or so and really liked what I saw. And do want to get back to it at some point, but I really, really liked it. The Expanse, though, I've seen all 4 seasons, read all the books. Hands down, best science fiction show on TV right now. Period. Like, I like Star Trek Discovery. I like Picard. I like Doctor Who. I like all these other big sci-fi shows that we watch. There's something I really love, quite obviously. The Expanse. I'm going to look right at the camera. The Expanse is the best science fiction show on TV right now, and one of the best science fiction shows of all time. And the book series, even more so. Book series is phenomenal and well worth reading. The Expanse, if you have not watched The Expanse, quit my live stream right now and go watch it. Like, just turn this off and just go watch the first episode of The Expanse. It is so good. So yeah. Winona Earp, Anime 2124. Winona Earp, also a great show. I've actually interviewed Dominique Provo-Chocolate and I'm blanking the other half of Way Hot. I'm blanking on their name, but I actually had dinner with them once and met them over dinner before I'd even seen the show. And then I watched the show, became fans of them in the show, and then got to interview them back when I worked at The Advocate. Winona Earp is a lot of fun. Not my favorite show of all time, but I love the cast. That's another show with just a fantastic cast. And I'm not just saying that because I've met them. So they're wonderful human beings. I think the podcast where I interviewed them still exists somewhere. If you look up The Advocates podcast, Winona Earp or Dominique Provo-Chocolate or something like that, you'll probably find my my interview with them. It was a lot of fun, and they're super sweet people. And then this is sort of and yes, The Expanse did jump to Amazon Prime. It's on Amazon Prime now, because Jeff Bezos is a fan of The Expanse, which, you know what? If you got Jeff Bezos money, you can afford to be like, hey, I like this show. Let's buy it and I'll finish it off. So yeah. So one good thing for Jeff Bezos is he saved The Expanse. I'll give him that. So billionaires are great now. Okay, last question here. Well, this is a question that's going to be... Janice, I have a live stream next week. I have a live stream at the same time every week. You asked a question, how should one deal with negative Star Trek outlets? I'm going to say 2 things on that. One, ask me that question next week, because I would love to actually answer that question, but I'm kind of wrapping out and getting tired. So I want to answer that question when I have more time to give to it than I have right now. But I have a lot of thoughts on that question. I will say mostly just ignore them. And if you see them harassing or pushing people that they should not be, step up for those people as best you can. Generally, just don't listen to them. Don't give them credence. Don't give them clicks. Just don't give them anything. Just ignore them as best you can. Call them out when you can. I think that's sort of the best thing to do. And then I'd also recommend, I did a video a few years ago. I'm sorry. I got a bunch of emails. Sorry. Just got a bunch of emails. I did a video about it like a year ago called, I forget the name of it, but I did a video about a year ago on that subject. Anyways, I just got a bunch of emails actually right now that I need to quick respond to. So I'm going to bid everyone adieu and tell you all good night. Thank you so much for joining us. And I believe, not next week, but next week I do my live stream, we'll be on the eve of a brand new Star Trek show. Lower Decks will be starting in a week, so looking forward to all of that with all of you, and have a wonderful evening, and it was great hanging out.